stopping by the channel. My name is Aaliyah, and we're going to recap and review Real Housewives Ultimate Girls Trip. This is season 2, episode 4. It was more chaos and fever dreams. Just this time, we had a lot more screaming, crying, and bourbon. It was a mess. But let's get into it. Opens up and we just see everybody waking up, getting their breakfast. We see Jill trying to make her like famous pancakes or like muffins or whatever. They're like chocolate chip muffins. We see Brandy text Eva some stupid text talking about like she's sorry. And I was just kind of like, I hope she's going to apologize to her in her face. Because if she's not going to apologize to her in her face, then like this text message means nothing. Because you had enough guts to like disrespect her husband and try to embarrass Eva in front of the ladies that you could apologize. So we find out for the day they're going to do a tea party that's going to be hosted by Taylor. They're doing a Dorinda aerobics, or yeah, I think it's Dorinda aerobics or Dorobics or whatever, with Dorinda in the morning, and then they're doing a prohibition dinner at night. So Brandy sees Eva in the morning and she actually apologizes. She explains what mangina means, but then when she explains it, it doesn't make sense. Because Brandy is trying to use mangina as like a dig in a sense. But then Eva, because it is a dig, but Eva reroutes it. And she basically says that like, no, my husband is a man. Like he does everything for me and my kids and me. And Brandy was like, you know, even in my marriage that I was married to him for 8 years, he didn't change diapers at least 2 times. And, you know, I'm just used to being the head of the household. And she was like, well, why would you call them a mangina? And then they just had a whole conversation about that. And then Eva basically was like, you know, you can't stay too mad at Brandy for too long. But I can tell that Brandy doesn't hear me, but she's telling me she hears me. And that's the thing with Brandy. Brandy just be talking just to be talking. And honestly, Brandy is a shock jock. Brandy says things to get like a knee-jerk reaction out of people. And that's like I said in my, you know, Bravo Bonanza. Brandy is fun for TV. She's great for TV because she's not afraid to go there and she's not afraid to like shock people or offend people. But in real life, she's exhausting because it's like it's but so many times that you can tell someone to STFU or call their husband a mangina or just be plain old disrespectful that people are going to constantly accept your apologies. Eventually, they're just going to push you to the side and not deal with you at all. And I don't know if Brandy has, I feel like Brandy has dealt with that, but she uses other things to like numb that side because I know Brandy has pushed a lot of important people in her life away because of her antics. So I forgot to mention this in the Bravo Bonanza, but at the end of episode 3, Tamara had to give Vicky the Heimlich maneuver after Vicky was taking all them pills and she was choking on one. It was a mess. We then have Dorinda going over the rules. So in her home or in Blue Manor, they're not supposed to eat upstairs, walk upstairs with their shoes, or do something else. Well, Vicky, Tamara, and Dorinda get into it because the housekeeper or one of the managers of the house finds out that like Tamara and Vicky were eating upstairs. But what we find out is that Dorinda put cupcakes in their rooms upstairs, I guess, as like a parting gift or like, you know, a welcome gift, just to be like, hey, thank y'all for coming and all of that stuff. So I felt like, okay, y'all could take them downstairs and eat at the table or eat downstairs. But they ate upstairs. All the girls, honestly, everybody has been eating upstairs, just not Vicky and Tamara. But Dorinda starts to get condescending when they're having this conversation as everybody is dressed up in their 80s attire to do Dorinda aerobics. And Dorinda's like, if you want me to treat you like a 6-year-old, I'll treat you like a 6-year-old. Do you eat upstairs where you live? I don't know where y'all live. I know maybe where y'all are from or where you live in your home. Y'all not used to these types of rules. So then she asks Vicky, because Vicky says, you know, I don't even eat in my room at my home. And Dorinda's like, well, then why are you eating in my house, in my rooms? And I told you not to. And Vicky was like, I don't really have an answer. And she said, okay, you answered it yourself. So Vicky and Tamara are kind of like reeling because on OC, Vicky and Tamara were like the alpha dogs. In this home, Dorinda is the alpha dog because this is her home. That's why I felt like Blue Manor shouldn't have been where they had their vacation. I feel like they should have been somewhere on neutral ground, because Dorinda keeps pulling rank, being like, this is my home, so we gonna follow by my rules. And that's basically what's happening. So Dorinda was like pissed off. She walks out the kitchen, and then you got Vicky and Tamara in their 80s attire. And Tamara is like shaking because, like, I guess she's embarrassed and she just felt like that was too much. Vicky starts to comfort Tamara because she legitimately starts to cry. And Dorinda walks out. She walks back in the kitchen and she's like, girl, what you crying for? And then Vicky's like, you really hurt her feelings. So then all of a sudden it's like white woman versus white woman, because they both start crying about being offended. And I'm like, well, as much as y'all know I love me some Dorinda, I did agree with Dorinda. If the rules is not to eat upstairs, don't eat upstairs. But Dorinda contradicted herself by putting like cupcakes upstairs. Like, you shouldn't have done that, but I get it. If that's the rule, that's the rule. Then she should have explained to them, like, hey, I put cupcakes upstairs in y'all's room. Could you come downstairs and eat them? I don't want any eating upstairs. But Tamara, like Vicky, not Dorinda's like crying, and then she starts lecturing them, talking about how are y'all offended when you offended me, and now you're making me cry because you're making me feel bad for like having these rules. And then they do like a time lapse because Dorinda is just going on and on and on. And then Tamara freaks out and was like, you don't talk to me that way. Like, gosh, don't be a bitch. And she like storms off like up the stairs. You got Phaedra like, whoa. Eva's like, what is going on? And then Dorinda walks behind Tamara and she's like, you know what? You don't even need to come. Like, you're not going to do that. And then Vicky just was like, well, Dorinda, you didn't have to come at her that way. So Vicky walks upstairs to go comfort Tamara. Phaedra is sitting in the room with her, and Phaedra is basically like, what's wrong? And Tamara basically explains to Dorinda that like she's basically making me feel like trash, like I'm an idiot, and like reprimanding me, and like that's not how I need to be spoken to. And then Phaedra's like, I'm like, okay, we just all need to calm down, take a breath. And what we find out is that the butler, I think his name is like Marco or Mario, he gave them yogurt upstairs. So they then do a montage and we find out everybody is eating upstairs. Like Jill's ate upstairs, Eva, Phaedra, Taylor, Brandy, like they've all eaten and drank drinks upstairs. So it's like, if she's gonna yell at Tamara or reprimand Tamara, because she really didn't yell, then Dorinda has to have the same energy for everybody else in the house. I just thought Tamara freaking out that way was a bit much. I was like, oh, okay, you screaming. It gave me very much, it's my opinion. It gave very much that energy when they were at the reunion, the OC reunion, and you got Vicky and like Shannon like, ooh. And even Andy was like, it was a lot. It was a lot. So then Dorinda aerobics starts happening. We see Vicky and Tamara in the little confessional room that they have in the house. And they don't go to Dorinda aerobics. They're like, yo, I need a break from her. They start to clean up their room. We end up finding out there's way more stuff they have in the room other than them cupcakes they found. They're like taking out wine bottles, other trash that they have upstairs, and they're trying to like run it downstairs really quick before Dorinda comes so they don't get yelled at again, because there are plaques. Dorinda put plaques in everybody's room doing the 3 house rules about like no shoes upstairs, no eating upstairs, and then something else upstairs. So, like I said, everybody comes to the Dorinda aerobics, and they all seem to have a good time, except Tamara and Vicky. So then in their room, you got Jill, Vicky, Tamara, Phaedra, and Taylor. Eva was like, I don't want no parts of that right there. And they were like, oh, you should have came. You should have came. Jill is trying to explain how Dorinda is, where they're like, Dorinda can blow up on you in like a split second, but then she's really nice and she'll let it go. But then Vicky's like, that's not how I work. I don't process things like that. So she was like, I just needed a moment away from all of that. So then we find out that Taylor is hosting the tea party. And, you know, Taylor loves to host a good tea party. So their ladies are all getting ready and stuff like that. I thought everyone looked good. I actually like Phaedra's hair with the black bob. It was cute. we have two cars going to the site where they're going to have the tea party. In one car, you got Vicky, Brandy, Jill, and Tamra. In the second car, you have Phaedra, Eva, Dorinda, and Taylor. And in the first car with Vicky, Tamra, Jill, and Brandy, they're basically talking about Dorinda and how she yells at people. And she was just like, it's just too much. Like, she ain't have to do all of that. And Jill was trying to like be like, well, you know, that's just how Dorinda is, but she doesn't really mean that much harm in the way she reacts. While this is going on, Brandy says in her confessional that she feels like the most recently fired housewives are still trying to play housewives, i.e. Vicky, Tamra, and Dorinda. And I was like, I can see that from Brandy's point of view, but it's like, Brandy, what are you doing? For the first 3 episodes, you are giving very much that energy. You argued with everybody. You argued with Eva. You had that moment with Eva with the mangina. You told Tamra, Vicky, and Taylor to shut the F up. And then you got into it with Dorinda. So it's like, for you to say that they're still like trying to play the housewives game, it's like you're trying to play the housewives game as well. So it's like spade meets spade. Like, call a thing a thing. Like, I get what she was saying, but I'm like, Brandy, like, what's the one? Right message, wrong messenger. It just didn't go coming out of Brandy's mouth. Then they get to the place where they're doing the tea party. It was actually really nice and very calm. They were eating what's it called, macaroons. They had cucumber sandwiches. They all seemed to have a good time. They then start talking about like the Dorinda aerobics, how they were having fun. Tamra is uncomfortable because she can't pretty much participate in the conversation. Phaedra asked, well, why didn't y'all come? Like, what was the issue? Why didn't y'all come? And Dorinda, like, Vicky and Tamara basically was like, they didn't really want to after what happened with Dorinda. And Dorinda basically was like, it hurt my feelings that y'all didn't come, and I worked really hard on that. And I'm like, Dorinda, as much as I like you, sis, you can't expect people to come after you make them feel like, come to something that you throw after you make them feel like trash. Like, you basically made Tamra feel like an idiot and inconsiderate. And Vicky was just riding with Tamra because she wants to ride with Tamra. And she just was uncomfortable. Then Dorinda basically says that she feels like Tamra and Vicky are like conjoined at the hip. And like Tamra is like Vicky's shadow. Or like vice versa. Like whatever one does, the other one's going to follow. And she was like, one of y'all could have came. And then Taylor in her confessional was like, it's giving very much Alice in Wonderland, where you have Dorinda is the Queen of Hearts, and then Tweedledee and Tweedledum with with Vicky and Tamra. And I said, okay, Taylor. Well, they basically agreed to disagree. And basically was like, we'll do a do-over. Because Dorinda was like, they were like, oh, we want to go to Dorinda aerobics. Because Dorinda had mentioned at the end, because they weren't sitting at this, all near each other at the table. At the end of the table, Dorinda was like, oh, we'll do it again because everyone had fun. But then when Tamra and Vicky was like, oh, we'll come to the next one, Dorinda was like, I don't really want to do all this over again. Like, Dorinda just felt like her mood was shot, and she didn't want them to participate in it anymore, because she was just kind of like, I don't see it for y'all no more. So they're about to leave the house. We see Jill giving Tamra a hug, and then Dorinda hugs her. And then Tamra says some crap talking about, I don't hold grudges. And I was like, that's a lie. You've held a lot of grudges. You've held grudges against Shannon, grudges against Heather, the grudge you got against Gretchen. Like, sis, let's not do that. Jesus Barbie, like, ma'am, you've held a lot of grudges against people. So that whole I don't hold grudges is such a lie. Excuse me. So then Vicky said the only way to win against Dorinda is not to fight with her. Just be quiet because you'll never win. So then Dorinda started getting a little snappy with Jill, where she was just like, okay, Jill, because Jill kept talking. And that's the issue with Jill. Jill don't know when to read. Like, Jill doesn't know how to read the room. Like, she didn't have to keep saying things, because you could kind of tell Dorinda was like, like, she hugged Tamra, but it was just kind of like, let me appease this situation. And she was just like kind of like over it. and having Jill chime in and be like, you know, we're all good people. We are just like high strung and have very dominant personalities. Basically co-signing what Eva was saying. It just made the situation worse because Dorinda was just like over it. So they get back to Blue Manor. It's 4 p.m. and everybody's sleepy. Everybody is laying down and going to sleep. We see Vicky and Tamara in their room talking about the whole shadow comment that Dorinda said. And they basically said they don't feel like they can really talk around Dorinda or she gonna come at their neck, as well as they don't really feel welcome. And that's kind of the downside of like merging cast, because the New York Housewives would have just rolled with it with Dorinda, because we've seen Dorinda gets drunk, she gets angry, she comes at your neck, and then she moves on, and then like everything's all good, or she'll apologize. With the but with the OC women, it's like they harbor on those things and then they use it for storylines and to keep it going. So it's just kind of like you're dealing with two different fractions. And I'm not saying that the way that Vicky or Tamara are reacting is wrong. I do think, like I said, as much as I love me some Dorinda, she is overreacting to a lot of things that like it doesn't need all of that. Like you could have just told them, please don't eat upstairs. I know y'all been eating upstairs, so can we cut that out? It didn't need to be a 20 minutes issue of you reprimanding them and talking to them and telling them they need to do this, this, and this. It didn't need to be that way. So then we see Jill and Taylor by the pool, and Jill was like on the phone with her boyfriend, and then they talk about Dorinda. So in the second car, like I told you, it was Phaedra, Dorinda, Eva, and Taylor. And they basically shared how Dorinda had a moment of like a breakdown moment where Taylor was like, I always see Dorinda as being strong. And Dorinda was very honest about missing her husband, Richard, and saying like she can't do everything by herself, but she feels like she has to do everything by herself. And then Jill chimes in and says that Dorinda really wasn't nice to her back in the day, that they really weren't really friends until after her husband died, and how what would happen would be like when Dorinda, like Jill said she got Dorinda on on Real Housewives of New York, and she said that Dorinda would not talk to her for the 6 months of filming, and then once they were done filming, then she would talk to her. And she was just kind of like, I think when you're in a happy place and someone else isn't in a happy place, they don't want to be around you, or they can't take your happiness. And I just kind of was like, no, Jill, no. I think the thing is like I told you guys in my Bravo Bonanza, I've always respected that Jill has been very upfront about wanting to be back on Real Housewives of New York, but Jill does give off desperation and thirsty. And if someone is filming a show that they know you want to be a part of, that they would feel like you would try to use them from, then they have every right to be like, let me pause on you for a minute. Because for her to be like, I'm not a user, but it takes a user to know that to think someone is a user. No, it's just people are smart enough to know when someone might be potentially, or have that feeling of you might be trying to use them. Like, Jill, you are thirsty. You are thirsty. We know you're thirsty, so let's not do that. I also don't like how she's trying to push this narrative that Dorinda is like, what Jill is doing is very backhanded. You're saying that you're always been nice and so good to this person. They have always done you dirty. Then why have you been nice to her? Why have you been comforting Dorinda? Why have you been there for her? Like, if someone's being nasty or rude towards me, I fall back. Like, I'm not about to give you that energy. So it's like, clearly you wanted something out of Dorinda, or you kept that friendship alive because you thought you could get something out of her. And that's not to say that Dorinda is right in her way of that she treats Jill, but girl, let's not act like you're so above it and that like you're such this good person, because we've seen the way you've acted in previous seasons of Real Housewives of not New Jersey, but New York. So it's the Prohibition dinner. Everybody's excited. I thought everyone looked great. I really liked the way Eva looked. I didn't like Tamara's because it looked too cheesy. I thought Vicky's dress looked really pretty. Phaedra looked nice. But yeah, my favorite outfit was Eva's. She was dressed like a gangster. She looked cute. Vicky almost fell trying to come down them steps in them heels. Brandy's outfit almost caught on fire because they had like tiki torches up. Tamara had to push her. Dorinda was so excited that everybody participated and made such a beautiful effort to participate in the whole dressing up of the prohibition thing. So she was really grateful to the ladies. They then did bourbon tasting. I don't like bourbon. My daddy loves bourbon. And I used to live in Kentucky. So, like, that's the bourbon capital. Like, everything got bourbon on it. Bourbon this, bourbon that. I don't. It burns too much going down your throat. But they had a bourbon tasting. I probably would do a bourbon tasting. But, like, bourbon is not not the type of alcohol I keep in my house. It's not. But they had the bourbon tasting. They were all having a good time. We finally got to see Whoop It Up Vicky, the Vicky I actually can tolerate and like. She was taking them shots back. We then get this, like, Vicky, for a moment, she was having a good time. And then I think, like, she started thinking about Rick and how she was just like, I know right now I'm just, like, in a bad period, but it'll get better. But she just really thought that Rick was her forever. And it just hurts that, like, when she goes home, she won't have anybody to go home to. So she got a little somber. They start dancing. They have this really pretty burlesque lady come out. Tamara starts stripping because she drunk off the bourbon. They all keep drinking. And then they got the butler, Marco. I think that's his name. Marco stripping. Well, he really didn't strip. Like, Brandy, like, ripped open his shirt. And I said, Brandy, you doing too much. Because it really didn't look like Marco wanted his shirt open. It really didn't. I said, calm down. So then the night is slowing down. Everyone is, like, getting into their pajamas except Phaedra. She actually got a phone call where I guess they took one of her son's phones away because he was being bad. And he didn't understand why his phone was being taken away. And so she was, like, on the phone with him in, like, the corridor area, like, sitting down, like, basically being a mom and parenting her child, and basically saying, like, I heard, like, they're telling me you were a part of the fight, so I told them to take your phone away. So they're sitting down. You got Dorinda, Jill, Vicky, and I think Tamara was sitting down, but then Brandy grabs Tamara because Brandy still wants to, like, whoop it up and party. And they start talking, Jill and Dorinda start talking about their friendship. And Vicky was like, she wanted to know more. We find out they've been friends for like 20 years. And they got interrupted by Brandy taking Tamara away to the kitchen so they could drink some more and dance with the burlesque dancer and somebody else that was there. Tamara flashes her titties. Brandy is drinking. Then Eva's like, you know what, I gotta get up and go to work because, you know, she's a part of, I think, like, Dish Nation still. So Jill is like, oh, can I sit in your room and, like, listen to you? And she was like, no, you have to get approved because it's a national, like, syndicated show. And then she was like, can I be on? And Jill and Eva's like, no, it's a nationally syndicated show. So then Dorinda is drunk. And Dorinda was like, Jill, leave her alone. Like, leave her alone. Like, you're doing too much. It's cringy. And then in her confessional, Eva was like, Jill means well, but, like, she doesn't read the room. And I was kind of like, yeah, Jill, she said she's going to work. And then Jill's like, well, I have friends that do podcasts. I say, a podcast versus work is two totally different things. A podcast that is not someone's income is different than her being on a radio show that she gets paid for. Like, she has to get approval from the other people that are part of the radio show. So then Jill gets upset and she was like, Dorinda's a bee. She didn't have to dress me down like that. She really made me feel bad. And, like, she interrupts Phaedra while she's on the phone. So Phaedra was like, what's going on? So then Jill and Phaedra are sitting in their confessional, like the little confessional room that they have. And Jill is basically saying that she feels like Dorinda was being nasty towards her. She's done all these things for Dorinda, but Dorinda never supports her. And she just keeps pushing her and being nasty towards her. So then Phaedra is just like, okay. So then Eva comes in, and then Dorinda comes in with a drink. And then Phaedra tries to explain to her that she says she feels like she has supported you in a lot of the things that you have done, but you haven't supported her. So then Dorinda gets mad and she gets in her feelings, and she's basically like, we've been through too much for you to be telling these people this. We've been to funerals. We've done this, this, and this. So then Jill was like, how dare you bring that up? And so Jill just gets up. Phaedra gets mad, and Phaedra's like, this is why I don't drink brown liquor, because people start acting funny. And Phaedra just is frustrated. Taylor was like, girl, I came to get you so we could go party downstairs. Because Taylor's like, what's going on? And so then Jill is like, I'm going to bed. And she was like, Dorinda's not a bad person, but this behavior she's displaying is very bad. And then Dorinda calls Jill weak because she doesn't want to constantly have the conversation. And I think that's where it ends. That's where it ends. Dorinda was just doing too much. Dorinda is drunk. Jill has been saying that Dorinda is just angry, and possibly so. Dorinda might be angry that like she's no longer with her husband Richard, that she probably planned her life with this man, and then unfortunately he succumbed to an unexpected disease, and now she is in her 50s, going probably into her 60s. I think she's in her 60s. I think she's like her 50s or 60s, having to live life without somebody she thought was always going to be there until they both succumb to like very old age. So I do think in that regard, I'll give Jill that. But I do find it kind of sneaky for Jill to be like putting it in everyone's ear that like, oh, I support her and I do all this stuff, but she doesn't support me. And I was kind of with Dorinda when she was like, if you have that issue, why didn't you just tell me? Like, you could have just told her, but you didn't. Like, you want to tell, like, you want to spread this around. So it's like, it does get thirsty, Jill. Because if you didn't need Housewives, or if you didn't want to be a part of Housewives, you wouldn't be taking this approach. Because this is a very tropey Housewives approach, to talk about your friend that you feel has done you wrong to everybody around your friend except your friend. Like, let's just call it a thing. But yeah, y'all, that is it. That is all. Remember to be bravely authentic and drop down in the comments below. Bye.